Good afternoon, boys and girls. I'm Christian, and I decided to do a retrospective on the animated Batman films, similar to a retrospective me and my friends did a year ago on the live-action Batman films, and I'm joined by the same cast of characters. I'm joined by my friend Chris.
What's up?
My friend Jeremy.
Hi, everyone.
And my friend John.
Hello.
And, as I pointed out already, we're doing a retrospective on all the animated Batman films. Now, full disclosure, I have not seen all these films yet. So there are certain films where when we get to them, we're going to mention them, but I'm going to defer to the other guys, see if they've seen them. And I decided I was originally going to include some of the animated Justice League movies, but I figured, you know what, that might make this overlong, so we might do that separately another time. So, the first movie I want to talk about is 1993's Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which is a spin-off of Batman the Animated Series. Continuity-wise, I'm not really sure when exactly this movie takes place, continuity-wise. Batman Mask of the Phantasm, I think, is a phenomenal movie. I think it's, honestly, not just one of the best animated Batman films, but one of the best Batman films in general. But what do you guys think of Batman Mask of the Phantasm?
I love it just because that aesthetic from the animated series was something that always appealed to me, like, so greatly. Because it has, like, this sort of gangster drama feel with all these, like, weird, crazy, dressed-up characters in it. But the film in particular is great because I love the character of Andrea, and, spoiler alert, the big reveal that she's the Phantasm. It's kind of has this great theme of, like, Bruce's demons coming back to bite him in the ass. And it's such a cool design of that character with the hook hands and with, like, the creepy, like, Red Death face, like, almost just gray. That was a really cool thing to do. And then on top of that, they also work in the origin. You know, like, when he decided to be Batman and how he achieved, like, the aesthetics that he wanted to go for and the ideas that popped into his head. So it ticks, like, all these different boxes. And the thing that's great about it is you really don't have to watch the animated series. It works very well, like, as its own entity. So it appeals to, like, everybody. If just, like, you like Batman in general, if you're getting into it because it's got the origin in it, you know, there's so many things that it can do. And, Hamill's Joker is just incredible. That whole third act with the chase through the complex is insane. And then that, like, it was like an Oscar-worthy laugh that he has in that final scene where Andrea, like, just, like, mists away with him, you know? It's, like, a very epic moment. So it's, like, all this cool stuff just, like, kind of spilling over in those final few minutes between Andrea, Joker, and Batman. It was this cool kind of triumvirate of chaos. You know, I really like that movie a lot.
Jeremy, what do you think of Batman Mask of the Phantasm?
I love it. I think it's a fantastic film, and, I've read somewhere that it was originally meant to be like the series finale for Batman the Animated Series, and if it had been, it would have just been so fitting, because it just, it is like a great finale. It's especially the final scene, it's, when the, rundown carnival is exploding, it's grand, that's definitely one to go out on. And, of course, the cast is fantastic. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill especially.
Not to cut you off, but I think Dick Miller's also, he plays a voice in it, which is freaking awesome because it's Dick Miller.
Yeah, he has a small role as, I believe, Chucky Saul, one of the gang members who the Phantasm is targeting. And, he does great with what he has to work with. And, I must mention Stacy Keach as the voice of the Phantasm. He is just great. I mean, he's definitely an actor who's very good at these kind of, villainous-type roles.
Oh, Stacy Keach, not to cut you off again, he's a fantastic actor. I don't know if you ever seen Ninth Configuration, but he's amazing in that movie.
Yeah, he was also very good in American History X, where he played the leader of this, group of neo-Nazis. He was very scary in that.
John, what do you think of Phantasm?
Favorite Batman film, period. What I love about it is the Phantasm, one of the best original Batman films ever. Like, you never saw that, like, any comic books ever, especially, like the Joker described in the film. He looks like the ghost of Christmas future, which I can kind of agree with that. I also love the background stories, especially explaining how, like, if Batman had not become Batman, maybe he could have had a normal, regular life, even though they don't show it, but it makes you think that way, which I think is great. And I love Kevin Conroy, Batman. Oh my god, he's best Batman, period. I mean, yes, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, and Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, good Batmans, but Kevin Conroy, you are Batman, period. And I also liked, who played Andrea was, Dana Delana, she was great. She was like one of like, I'm surprised they never like brought her back that much in like future like Batman like films or maybe episodes or small appearances. And
Actually, that is, I don't know about the voice, but I know Andrea did show up in an episode of Justice League
yes,
Unlimited.
she did.
Another cast member I want to mention is the late Abe Vigoda as Sal Valestra. He's the leader of the old gang of criminals, and I think he just does a great job. And it's so fitting that they have him play the role of this, mobster, since he played one in The Godfather. And I think he does a wonderful job. And I actually had the privilege of meeting him a few months before he passed away. And I didn't talk to him about Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, but he was still just so wonderful to meet. I did ask him about Marlon Brando on the set of The Godfather, and he said, oh yeah, he'd be sitting in his makeup chair joking around. So that was a lot of fun. I just love the music in this movie. It's so just perfectly eerie and haunting. And I also love, the flashback scenes, because I agree with John. This movie kind of gives you a hint at what Bruce's life might have been like had he not been Batman. He could have been happy, and of course, I love how in the flashback scenes, every time you see Bruce kind of start to be happy and start to get a life, there's some kind of ominous symbol that kind of pops up saying, oh no, it's not going down that way. And I just love that. Well, it wasn't always subtle, but I love that imagery that comes out, and I love that how that symbolizes his eventual fall into becoming Batman.
Yeah. One thing I love about this movie, now I kind of consider this in a lot of ways almost a better follow-up to the Tim Burton Batman movies than Batman Forever. Granted, this came out before Batman Forever, but even though this isn't in continuity with the Tim Burton Batman movies, I feel like this is a better follow-up to those movies, and in some ways is a better Batman movie than those movies, because this gets into the psychology of both Bruce Wayne and Batman way more than the Tim Burton movies could ever even hope to.
What helps is the animation, I think, because it allows you to get away with more. It keeps it grounded despite the fact that, these people are dressed up ridiculous costumes. It's the same thing with the video games. It benefits from that, too, because when it comes to doing live action, you got to take a step back and make sure that everything seems serious. Whereas with this, because it's a cartoon, you kind of can just do straight, even though everybody's, all wearing these ridiculous costumes. And, Joker is, very tough to take seriously, despite the fact that he's, a brutal killer. So that's the reason, I think, why Mask of the Phantasm works so well, is because, you can just keep the silliness and not have to address it,
Yeah. John, you wanted to say something?
Believe it or not, Siskel Ebert enjoyed this more than Batman Forever or even the Tim Burton films.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing their review of this. I think Siskel said, in fact, I enjoyed this more than the recent Batman movie, and I kind of like that movie.
Also, one more thing. It's kind of surprising that when this film came out, it was not a success, that the marketing was just really bad, because you would think that Disney did not release any animated films that year. They were going to, take in control. Warner Bros. Was going to be like, we're going to step up and make a lot of money from this film, but no, it just...
I have a theory that might have had something to do with, because a lot of parents complained about how dark Batman Returns was. Maybe that had something to do with the lack of success of this movie.
Well, one thing was I wanted to just add on to what you were saying about Siskel and Ebert. Yeah, they did like the movie, although I distinctly remember Siskel saying about the Joker, I don't like this Joker. I don't like his voice. And,
I disagree with Siskel on that
one. And I'm like, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone criticize Mark Hamill's performance as the Joker.
Yeah.
But everyone's entitled to their own opinion, of course. And, I have to mention the scene. This is one of my favorite moments of comic relief in the movie. When it's very early, it's during this big party scene that Bruce is having, and Arthur Reeves, the sleazy senator, comes around, and he kind of makes a snide remark saying, "Oh, you let that one go, Bruce," in regards to his love life, and Bruce just gives him a napkin and says, "Here's a napkin, Arthur. You know where you can stick it."
Something I want to point out about this, and this is a compliment I would have for both this movie and Batman the Animated Series in general, is even though this is geared towards children, adults can very much enjoy it as well. There's a lot of, not just adult humor, but adult situations, and as I pointed out before, this is really a character drama.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's why Batman the Animated Series has stood the test of time, is because, while it was meant for kids, it was also, they were also making this for adults as well.
I just wanted to say a little bit more about the Phantasm himself. I just love the look of him, first and foremost. You know, he really looks like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a horror villain? Or...
Well, a more sort of techno-hyperized version of Death.
Yeah.
You know, he's got all the gadgets, all the gizmos, but he's still got that kind of familiar skull face. And like, as I mentioned before, Stacy Keach just does an amazing job voicing him. Low and deep and very somber. Your angel of death awaits. You know, that is just pitch perfect for this role.
Something I want to point out, this is something that's always confused me, is like, okay, when the Phantasm or Andrea, when the steam comes out of the hook,
Yeah.
you could say when she disappears, she does what Batman does, where he just runs away when the steam comes, but there are certain points where it's like, no, it seems like she physically disappeared, so like, is there some kind of magic involved, or some kind of like, weird, like, technology that she's using? It's something that's never really gone into. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Maybe that was purposefully not explained to kind of keep up the mystery of the character. I mean, once, of course, her identity is revealed, there's not much mystery, but maybe they just didn't want her. They didn't want to give everything away, I suppose.
I think so, but like, admittedly, like the gears in my head start turning and start dipping into like Batman lore to try to come up with explanations. Like, you know, she somehow knew about the Lazarus pits and she's using some kind of magic, or she got training from like the League of Assassins or something like that. You know?
Yeah, it also, taking into account the continuity of like the new Batman adventures and then Justice League, you had Edric and the Demon come into it, so you know supernatural stuff exists in the DC animated universe.
I could see it, and that'd work a lot better for her too as a character, because you know, that being like that visage of death, it would work way better if she was using like magic powers and stuff like that. And also, interesting thing, I don't know if they ever do this in like a live action adaptation or something, but something I really like is when people mess around with the idea that magic and science are the same thing. And the fact that she's using these techno gadgets like coupled together possibly with magic powers, that'd be a cool thing to explore for the character. Just like the idea of like, you know, everything is the same, despite the fact that she's using two very different avenues of like ability, you know.
One thing a question I want to ask is, at the end, it seems like she kills the Joker, but taking into account that, like, all the other stuff that's in this continuity and the Joker does come back, obviously she didn't.
There's actually a comic to this movie. It's like one of the, based off the Batman animated series, comics they made were like, these are like comic books that were made because they never made episodes. They thought, let's make comics out. And it actually explains what happens to the Joker, actually.
Oh, really? That's cool.
The Joker doesn't die, but I don't remember like what happens to him, because I read the comic like years ago, but I highly recommend check it out.
Something I want to point out about the Joker is they kind of explain the Joker's origin in this, where, okay, you find out he was one of the gangsters who is responsible for Andrea's father's death. But that also, I'm not a big fan of it actually outright explaining Joker's origin, but it seems like they were kind of taking that off of the movies, where in Tim Burton's movie, you find out that the Joker was a gangster before he became the Joker.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was alright, because they didn't really go too in-depth to his origin. Like, they didn't give him a name, they just said he was a criminal gang member of Sal Valestra's gang, so I thought it was okay. They didn't reveal too much about him.
I do like the way that they kind of kept tangible to Burton's Batman, even though they did their own thing. Like, it doesn't get as personable. Like, you don't know him as Jack Napier or anything like that. But yeah, they do. Okay, he was a straight up gangster who like fell down and ate chemicals, all that thing. I like that they kind of like, you know, did a nod to it, but also did their own thing.
Yeah, and I think it's perfectly, you know, horrifying what he does to Sal Valestra later. You know, he distorts his face into that, not quite a grin, but I guess not quite a shriek either. It's kind of a mix between the two, but he, you know, and he uses it as bait. I like how they keep him smart, you know.
When I was a kid, that scene used to freak me out when I watched that scene.
Oh, absolutely. It was freaky as hell.
Yeah.
I want to point out that this movie had a comic book adaptation and a novelization. The comic book adaptation, I have the movie on VHS, and the comic book adaptation that I have came with my copy of this movie on VHS, and there's also a novelization of this, and I recommend both of those. I don't know if either of you guys have read
I never
those.
did.
I'm actually happy to hear there was a novelization. Who wrote it?
Andrew Helfer, I think is his name.
I need to check that out. I knew about the.
I read the comic, but I didn't know there was a novelization. I want to check that out sometime.
Okay, real quick, any closing thoughts on Batman Mask of the Phantasm?
Definitely check it out, even if you haven't seen the cartoon or if you're new to Batman. If you haven't seen it but you love Batman, there's a lot to enjoy. Yeah, definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I watch it all the time. It's just got a great story with a lot of emotional depth. It's got, great characters, and, it's a very satisfying entry in the Batman saga.
It's a great Batman film, period. If anyone out there wants to get started into Batman, I recommend start with this, and you'll be very surprised.
Next, we come to 1998's Batman and Mr. Freeze, Subzero. This is the second spin-off movie of Batman the Animated Series. Now, people could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think continuity-wise, this is supposed to be set between Batman the Animated Series and New Batman Adventures, which was the sequel series they did, which has now been released on DVD as Batman the Animated Series Season 4. And to a certain extent, you could almost say this is sort of a cash-in and sort of an apology for Batman and Robin. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. Actually, me and my friend Eric did a review on this movie back in 2014, but I have not seen the movie since we did that review, so I'm going to defer to some of you guys for this movie. Chris, what do you think of this movie?
I think it's great. It's interesting you bring up, you feel it's an apology for Batman and Robin. It's actually, that makes a lot of sense when I think about it. But, it makes sense that he would be the villain to get his own movie right out of the gate, because he was, this is the definitive, I think, incarnation of Mr. Freeze from that cartoon, because the whole thing with Nora, all that, completely redefined who he was. And I liked it ends in a place where, him and Batman aren't quite enemies anymore. They're actually kind of allies, and they started messing around with that in the video games and all the other stuff, and I think it's a cool place to bring the character.
What makes that kind of sad, though, is, if this is set between Batman the Animated Series and New Batman Adventures, you see him go back to being a villain in that, and then, of course, you had the really heartbreaking episode of Batman Beyond that brought Mr. Freeze back, and so, this brief period of happiness in this movie didn't last. But Jeremy, what do you think of this one?
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember enjoying it very much. I think Michael Ansara, who does a great job voicing Mr. Freeze, he's got a perfectly cold, emotionless tone to him, so yeah, I like it.
Better than Batman and Robin. This is how Bruce Timm responded after Batman and Robin. What I like about it was how, I feel like when you think about it, Mr. Freeze is, not, as evil as, what the Joker or other, Batman villains are, because he's really misunderstood, because all he wants is his wife to get better from a disease that she has. I like it how, whoever the actress is who played Batgirl on this was way better than Alicia Silverstone, and I like it how, despite that she's, the one that's wanted from Mr. Freeze, that she has the same rare blood organ donor as his wife, and she wants to help him, but just not that way.
Yeah, once again, it's been a while since I've seen this, but I remember liking this a lot. The only thing I was not crazy about were the little shots of CGI animation.
Yeah.
That really kind of bugged me, because I personally think most CGI animation is freaking fugly.
It depends if it's, done right. I mean, it wasn't... It didn't really... I can see, your point, but it didn't really bother me that much. This is the last movie that Bob Kane saw before he died of Batman films.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is sad. Even though I think Bob Kane got more credit, Batman was created by both Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and I'm so glad that now you're starting to see that. Now people are finally acknowledging Bill Finger, but I have some resentment for Bob Kane because of that.
Well, from what I understand, Bob Kane came up with the initial concept, but then Bill Finger came and added a lot of the stuff that we know and love to it.
And also, he wrote those original stories. I always put more, value on the writer.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Now we move on to Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, which was released in 2000, and this is a spin-off of Batman Beyond, which was set in the same continuity as Batman the Animated Series, but set years and years in the future. Now, continuity-wise, I heard this is actually supposed to be set after the events of the Batman Beyond episode King's Ransom. I don't know if that's true or not, but honestly, though, it could be set anywhere in the Batman Beyond continuity, I guess. What do you guys think of Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker?
I like it because it serves as like a great epilogue to this character, like where it went in the future, how people look at him in retrospect, and then kind of the big shocker of who it is nowadays. And it also works, I guess, even though you say continuity-wise it takes place like somewhere in between it works well as an epilogue to that show too. Kind of like bringing back the Joker for like one big like final story. I like that a lot, and I like that they were willing to get darker. If you've seen like the unrated cut, like things get pretty disturbing at times, and it was cool to do that because I think this was coming at the cusp of where like everybody who had watched it like as a kid was starting to become an adult, that kind of thing, and it worked really well for kind of just enjoying Batman as an adult. It was a cool like transitional piece.
Yeah, I really like it too. I like it because it does, explain whatever happened to this great villain, that everyone, knew and quote unquote loved. And I also just love how this movie is one of those really great examples of how absolutely cruel the Joker can be. I mean, what you see him do in this movie is definitely on par with him shooting Barbara Gordon. I mean, what he does.
Even though that didn't happen in this continuity. Sorry
Correct.
to jump over you there.
Well, correct, but I mean, what he does to Tim Drake is just so absolutely vile that, I mean, it's a wonder how, they did explain, like, he was eventually able to return to sanity, but it's a wonder how they were able to do that.
Yeah, do you think they might have been trying to, like, even though he didn't kill him, but somewhat base that off of what the Joker did to Jason Todd in the comics?
Maybe I could see that as like a connection.
Maybe. I never thought of it like that.
So basically, like Death in the Family kind of reference, but different though.
Yeah. What do you think of Return of the Joker?
It's pretty good. I love Batman Beyond the show. It was a different like interpretation of Batman. And actually, you know how they say like Batman Returns was like dark and scary for kids. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, I was a little bit more scared of this movie than Batman Returns because. Like, remember, like, when you see, like, what the Joker did to Tim Drake's Robin, I thought that was, like, one of the scariest, like, things to me, like, oh, yeah, remember, like, how it's, like, revealed, like, how the Joker comes back, the idea that he's, like, implanted, I thought that was, like, a scary thought, too, and it was also an interesting twist of, like, not knowing that it was, Tim Drake was, like, the Joker the whole time.
And what I really like about this movie is... throughout a lot of it, it's this really suspenseful mystery film where you're not really sure how the Joker came back. Obviously, we just spoiled it, but we're going to be doing a lot of spoilers in these reviews. But I like how the movie, for all intents and purposes, is kind of a ghost story, even though there is a scientific explanation for how the Joker comes back. There is still sort of the element of the ghost story genre. What do you think of that, though? Do you think this could qualify as almost like a ghost story?
Definitely, yeah. It's got like sort of like a mild horror bent to it. Kind of like the specter of the Joker kind of residing over this whole thing, and then the freakiness of exactly how he's back and how that even works. I really like that bit where he just like appears out of smoke and he's like, "Hey, Gotham, Joker's back," and Bruce just kind of goes wide-eyed and he's like, "How?" Like he's just so horrified.
Oh, your old eyes don't fool you. I am back, and I just love how the Joker just rubs his face in it, And I agree with Chris, that is a grand entrance, and it's perfectly fitting for the Joker, Hello, Gotham, Joker's back in town! I mean, that's definitely the way to make his comeback.
And I actually think the Joker in this movie, arguably the scariest we've seen this version of the Joker, like the Batman the Animated Series Joker.
Like I said, it was the scariest, like one of the scariest like Joker moments, and also like when you see like when Bruce Wayne sees like the Joker like on stage, he was like shot, like thinking, like you said, how is it possible? How is he still alive? Because I saw you get killed years ago.
And another thing I want to mention is, the Joker's gang in this movie. I think they're very entertaining characters because I think they all have their own distinct personalities. You've got the mutated werewolf one, you got the two Harley Quinn twins, you've got the the overweight one in the pink outfit I think he's in, and I think they're very good, and I just love the first scene when we're introduced to him and one of them stands up to him and he's like, back in your day, it's always back in your day, how do we even know you are who you say you are?
That was Henry Rollins playing Bonk.
I want out. If you insist. How the Joker handles that mutinying henchman in that scene is just, it fits him so perfectly, and he definitely shows who's boss.
I love when douchebags get put in their place, and even though the Joker's a douchebag himself, that guy was even more of a douchebag and needed to be put in his place. Because there's something I hate more than an unintelligent douchebag.
I just want to mention how I love that they have Mark Hamill voice both the Joker and, this corrupt businessman named Jordan Price, who's trying to run Bruce Wayne out of Wayne Enterprises. I think that was definitely a perfect way to kind of, spoiler alert, make us think that Jordan Price was behind the Joker. Besides that, Mark Hamill just does a great job at making him sound, real sleazy and obnoxious.
I don't know if everybody caught Harley's cameo at the end. Yeah, I thought that was a really cool, unexpected thing for her to have made it to, the future and also to have sort of gotten a happy ending. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I feel like she almost deserves the happy ending.
Because she's a victim at the end of the day,
Yes.
So.
Now, I do want to point out before we close this movie off that the Justice League Unlimited episode, the Once and Future Thing, could almost count as sort of a semi-sequel to this movie. They do kind of, at one point mention some things, like the gang comes back and all that. I just wanted to bring that episode up.
Yeah, and speaking of that, there's also that episode where Terry kind of interrogates Amanda Waller, about how he's blood related to Bruce. And there's this kind of, it's not a flashback, it's like Terry, I think, imagining what it would be like, where he confronts Bruce and says, you did something where you altered my DNA to match yours. And, Bruce says, the technology's been illegal for 40 years. And then Terry goes, didn't stop the Joker from using it on Tim Drake. And then he says, sorry, low or low. So it was referenced again.
Yeah. Now we move on to Batman Mystery of the Batwoman, which came out in 2003, and this is another spin-off of the animated DC universe. You could say this is set during the events of the new Batman adventures, obviously taking place before the flashback scenes of Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. Now, Jeremy and Chris haven't seen this movie, so they're going to sit this one out.
It was alright. It wasn't that bad. I mean, it's not like Phantasm or Subzero. It was just okay. It was just another fun action flick Batman with Batwoman coming in saving the day basically.
Yeah,
It was nothing special. I mean, I don't hate the film. It's not bad. It's not up there like I said with Phantasm.
I saw this movie years ago, and me and my friend Eric actually reviewed it, but I have not seen it since me and my friend Eric reviewed it, so I can't really comment on it too much, but I thought it was an alright movie. I thought it was decent. I was not really a big fan of Bane in this movie, but I was never really a big fan of Bane in the animated series in general.
Yeah.
I think the animated series kind of misused Bane.
Yeah, I can see why.
And I want to point out that this is in the animation style of the new Batman adventures, and I absolutely despise what they did to Jim Gordon's chin. He looks like freaking Robert Sadar. For any of you who know who Robert Sadar is.
One thing I wanted to point out, remember Paul Williams? He played the Penguin in the 90s in the new Batman Animated Adventures.
Yeah.
He was not in this one. David Owen Steers was the voice of the Penguin. He was not bad. Just when I heard his voice, I kept thinking about Jumba from Lilo and Stitch. It was kind of distracting to me, taking his performance as Penguin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we said all we could say about
there's really not
Mystery
much,
of the Batwoman.
Yeah, there's really not much I can say about the fact that it's just basically Batman and Batwoman saving the day. That's it.
Now we come to The Batman vs. Dracula, which came out in 2005, and this is a spin-off of the TV show The Batman, and this features Batman fighting Count Dracula, who of course originated in the novel by Bram Stoker, and I guess you could say this movie is somewhat inspired by the 1992 Elseworld graphic novel, Batman and Dracula: Red Rain. Now, I personally have never seen any episodes of the show, so I can't really comment on the show too much. The movie itself, I think, is alright. I don't think it's a bad movie at all. I think it's a pretty decent, kids' horror film. I do like Peter Stormare as the voice of Dracula. Chris, you said you haven't seen this yet? Now, have you seen any episodes of The Batman?
I've seen it, and it's like they were trying to do something different with it, but, I mean, they don't quite hit the mark. I bet it ran, I think, 4 seasons, so they must have been doing something right.
Yeah.
I think it was just, a weirder take on it that responded to some people, and then that resulted in them eventually doing a vampire movie, so I liked it a lot. And I heard that Edward James Olmos is the voice of like the police chief. It's not Gordon, I know that, but I mean, I'd watch it just for that. So
Edward James Olmos was the voice of Chief Roja, who was a policeman who really hated Batman. Eventually, he was, I think, replaced by Commissioner Gordon later in the series.
Well, what do you think of this movie?
I like it. I thought it was great to have Batman square off against Dracula. And I mean, I liked the series. I mean, I think that when not compared to Batman the Animated Series, I think it can be very good, on its own. But yeah, this movie I remember enjoying very much. I liked the actor who played Dracula. I can't think of his name, but I think he
Peter Stormare.
Oh, Peter Stormare?
Yeah.
Oh, I know him. Yeah, he did a great job. And I also liked, I think Kevin Michael Richardson does a great job as the Joker. For, this version, I think his voice fits perfectly well. And I think there are definitely some very dark moments in this. Dracula makes Batman kind of regress into these very horrible, nightmarish scenarios, and I think they play out very well, too.
John, what do you think of this?
Do not like this one. I don't really hate it. I just don't really like it as much. I mean, I like the idea and the concept, Batman and Dracula. I always go for stuff like that, where Batman fights like anybody outside of like the DC universe. And
You're just mad that Bela Lugosi didn't play the voice of Dracula.
who played the Dracula in this?
Peter Stormare.
I guess he was a good Dracula. I just wish the film could have been just more an adult animated film than a kid's cartoon.
Real quick, I just want to mention that I actually thought the scene when the Joker turns into a vampire and he's going through almost like blood withdrawals, that's actually a really good horror scene for what is supposed to be a kid's movie. But Jeremy, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to mention the scene where the Joker first breaks out of Arkham, and, he sees Gotham, and he's celebrating his victory by just going, "Goodbye, Arkham, hello, Gotham," and something about that line just resonated with me, because I actually wrote to Kevin Michael Richardson, and I sent him a few pictures, and then later on I also sent him one of my copies of Batman the Killing Joke, because I thought, maybe it would be cool to get actors who've played the Joker to sign on the inside of it. So I sent it to him, and I said, would you mind writing "Goodbye Arkham, hello Gotham" along with your autograph? And he did it. Nice. He actually did it, and I'm very grateful to him for it.
I thought it was pretty cool, when Batman fights the Joker. Also, didn't the Penguin become a vampire in the film?
I think he became more of like a familiar, almost like the Renfield kind of.
Right. Which was still, I thought that was pretty cool.
One thing I want to add on to that is just, the Penguin is very, very stuffy and obnoxious and arrogant, and he's got a huge ego. So when Dracula first, says, "I need a human servant to serve me," he's like, "Oh, hang on a second, the Penguin serves nobody." But then he looks at him and he just goes, I'm Penguin, I'll be your servant," and he just does a complete 180. That's definitely a great moment of comic relief in this very dark, nightmarish film.
I remember when this came out when I was 12 or 11 years old. It kind of got me it led me to the path of learning about how that Dracula was an inspiration for Batman. When you look at the Lugosi cape and compare that to Batman.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how I think that the Joker is definitely very terrifying as a vampire, and I just love when Batman changes him back to human, how, when he's eating the blood, he takes a moment to, kind of think about it, and he's like, "Ugh, this doesn't taste right. Are you sure this is fresh?" It's like, oh, well, at least he's, you could say he's like a blood connoisseur. I just always found that to be funny.
I decided to split this into 3 parts, so that's it for part 1, and part 2 and 3 will be coming soon.